October 24th, 1929 marked the beginning of a formidable era on the rise in American history. National powers quaked and powerful countries trembled. This was the day of the notorious stock market crash, foreshadowing the dark age America was soon to be engulfed in. On October 29th, 1929, the United States' official dive into what would later be known as the Great Depression commenced, lasting for about a decade. Though the Depression is most notable for its restraints on the American economy, the initial crash of the global stock market and its effects quickly radiated to other nations. The Depression is often used as a precedent to see how rapidly and significantly even the largest of nations can fall. There was some triumph to this tragedy. The decline of this period of economic depression is often accredited to then-President Franklin Delano Roosevelt and his proposed New Deal, along with the impact it had on the lives of those less fortunate even prior to the market crash. One of America's most pending problems inadvertently aided various others. By the means of enabling numerous federally funded government agencies, programs, and administrations, the New Deal simultaneously assisted in lowering unemployment and stabilizing the economy. Even still, the effects of this proposal from decades ago are still echoed in today's society. It established agencies reinstated to this day, most notably the Civilian Conservation Corps, or the CCC. By acknowledging this agency, the association between its results and how this group in particular directly impacted America as a result of President Roosevelt and his New Deal can be addressed.
The stock market crash of 1929, also called the Great Crash, was the period of plummeting stock prices due to investments made by stockbrokers in Wall Street. Investors were selling their stocks and they slowly fell into debt, which caused them to sell more stocks in order to pay their bank loans. This resulted into the free fall of the stock market. The aftermath of the crash led to a rise of unemployment, a decline in manufacturing, and the failure of a significant portion of America's banks. The stock market crash was not the sole cause of why the economy failed, but it was the leading factor of increasing the collapse of America's economy. Multiple factors that added to the cause of the crash was overwhelming debt, continuous bank loans, and the failure of agricultural services.
The stock market crash, the Dust Bowl, also known as the Dusty 30s, was a severe period of time during the 1930s, where the Southern Plains region of the United States suffered a terrible drought which brought various dust storms. It was caused by multiple series of agricultural and financial factors such as the wet hard changes, land policies, and the economy of the country. It caused many deaths due to its high winds and bad conditions, and it led to bad farming environments. It further worsened the declining economy, and it drove farmers' families to migrate from their homes in search for good land or soil or for other working opportunities. Land acres that were once used for farming and agricultural resources were rendered useless, and large amounts of money and jobs were lost due to this. The population in various states during the time declined at a high rapid rate due to the rough environment and conditions along with the declining economy.
The Great Depression signified the worst economic recession in American history that lasted for a decade. Families lost their homes and jobs. Those who were able to keep their jobs experienced almost a 50% decrease in their salaries, and birth rates declined. Consumers were spending less on goods and services as they were struggling to get the basic necessities they needed. Spending declined, economic output declined, employment declined, failing companies and businesses were laying off workers, and the country's industrial production had decreased by 50%. The homeless population rose as the economy continued to worsen, and people could not make ends meet. Soup kitchens gained popularity as they provided the homeless with a source of food. The agricultural sector declined as the Dust Bowl ruined most of the fertile land that farmers used, and most were unable to find land to continue farming. Those that did have access to farmland lacked the resources to harvest the crop they produced and had no choice but to abandon their crops, allowing them to go rot. This contributed to a depletion of food products to provide to people who relied on their crops.
Involvement in the Great Depression was controversial at first. Republicans were not in favor of government involvement as they were more concerned with a free market economy. They did not believe it was the role of the government to provide economic relief for its people. However, with the dire situation of the economy, the citizens of the United States had a different perception.
In the campaign of 1932, Franklin Delano Roosevelt was running as a Democratic nominee for the presidential election. He garnered support all around the nation, especially in the South and in the West. As former governor of New York, he was an ideal candidate because of his experience in politics and his efforts towards bettering the situation of New York as a result of the Great Depression. Other candidates were running, such as John Garner, who was the Speaker of the House, and Alfred Smith. However, they were more concerned with their conflicting views on Catholicism and prohibition. Been important issues during another period, the main priority of the nation during this time was the Great Depression, as everyone was feeling its effects. As Franklin Roosevelt's priority was aiding the country through alleviating the effects of the Depression, he received momentous support during his campaign and was finally elected as the 32nd President of the United States in 1932. Americans had high aspirations for his presidency.
To the ongoing epidemic, then-President Franklin D. Roosevelt gave an inaugural address to 100,000 people on Washington Capitol Plaza the year of his inauguration into the presidential office in 1932. In this, he reassured citizens that the government was taking action to try and alleviate the effects of the Great Depression. His first actions consisted of establishing what historians often refer to as the First New Deal, a domestic program that manifested numerous government-branded institutions that assisted in the relief, recovery, and reform of the economic structure of the U.S. This is the same part of the New Deal that produced what is known today as the alphabet agencies, which were set up to execute and enforce policies established in FDR's Second New Deal. After a long 2-year period of development, the New Deal instated countless programs essential to today's modern welfare systems, the most successful being the Civilian Conservation Corps. D was fundamental in demeaning the problems prevalent during this time, especially poverty and unemployment. The CCC also had 2 particular targets of interest when looking for employers: young men who were poor and unemployed during the ages of 18 and 25. One with the knowledge that they would gain benefits while recruited. And from here, the CCC put these men to work. Via membership into the program as one of their employees, workers had the benefit of earning checks higher than today's current minimum wage. They also earned around $30 a day, often sending 30% of their earnings back home to their families. Similarly, they were presented with the opportunity to tackle the challenge of gaining or regaining a high school education. From this, they developed skills and knowledge that made them more employable for other jobs that benefited society. As an example, several workers were recruited by alternate New Deal programs such as the Soil Conservation Service or the Agricultural Adjustment Administration, which focused on the repair of America's agricultural landscapes, which had fallen due to the Dust Bowl.
All in all, the Great Depression was one of the worst economic recessions in America's history, whose effects were felt all around the world. Banks experienced failures, farmers and other citizens were greatly unemployed, homeless population increased, and American industries reduced production. However, the New Deal program greatly advanced the economy as well as the environment of America. The Civilian Conservation Corps simultaneously created jobs for unemployed young men while also planting trees, constructing highways, providing better roads, bridges, buildings, and etc. with the hard work of about 3 million men. This program lasted until before the Second World War, as men were needed to enlist in the army. Regardless, they left significant impact on the nation for years to come, and FDR allowed the economy to rise from the recession. Men who worked for the CCC were preferred in various jobs because employers believed that they had good work ethic and they believed that they were disciplined and respectful young men.